You know how official policies can sound great on paper, but what happens when you actually have to sign a real contract? Well, today, we're going to pull one apart, clause by clause, and see how a system can be designed to push pretty much all the risk onto just one person.
So, in our last explainer, we went through all the official stuff from CLBC, the main governing body. We saw the ideal setup, the theory of how things are supposed to work in a real partnership.
But today, we're leaving all that theory behind. We're going to dive into a real contract, one that was handed to a home-sharing provider named Victor in 2023. And let me tell you, the difference between the official vision and what was actually written down in black and white, it's not a gap, it's a canyon.
So here's how it started. The agency first showed him a softer kind of sample agreement, but the actual document he was asked to sign, that was a completely different animal. It was loaded up with what we're calling extra weight, a whole bunch of new demanding clauses that completely tipped the scales.
First thing on the list, you have to register for WorkSafeBC, and you're footing the entire bill. And get this, the clause even said that if you don't do it, the agency can just sign you up themselves and then take the cost right out of your pay. So it's not really a choice, is it? It's a demand.
And here's some really important context. Back in 2023, this wasn't even a clear legal requirement for this kind of work. CLBC, the big oversight body, didn't officially require it, and they definitely weren't paying for it. That only started in July 2024. This means the agency was forcing a big cost onto the provider long before it was standard funded practice.
The contract didn't just stop with the provider either. It reached right into their personal life. One clause said that every single adult living in the house had to follow the agreement's rules. And if you wanted to hire a helper, you couldn't, not with the agency's written permission. And even then, that helper would also be legally bound by this contract they never even signed.
And this is where it just gets absurd. For Victor, this meant his 86-year-old mother, who doesn't speak English, was now legally on the hook for this incredibly complex professional contract. I mean, just think about that for a second.
And the financial risks just kept piling up. This clause gave the agency the power to change the provider's monthly pay whenever they wanted. All they had to do was give 30 days notice. Any sense of financial stability is just gone.
And just look at this power imbalance. The agency could terminate the contract on short notice and walk away. But the provider? If they wanted to leave, they were required to keep working for 3 full months after giving notice, even if the agency had just used its power to slash their pay. This next one is a real head-scratcher. The contract actually demanded that the provider act as an unpaid backup for the agency's own staff. So if an agency employee just doesn't show up for their shift, the provider has to cover it. For free. You're basically forced to solve the agency's staffing problems.
Then you've got this insurance clause. The provider had to get a major commercial insurance policy for their home. The catch? It was a rental. Forcing a tenant to get a commercial policy on a property they don't even own is not only super expensive, it's often nearly impossible.
The contract was also full of these really vague but potentially huge responsibilities. Things like having to hand over all of the client's documents, with no clear rules on consent, or having a duty to ensure the client's financial well-being. I mean, what does that even mean? It's a fuzzy term that could leave you on the hook for anything.
So, faced with this mountain of one-sided clauses, Victor didn't just walk. He actually tried to negotiate. He suggested adding one very simple clause, something focused on basic safety.
So Victor's proposal was pretty straightforward. He basically asked for a safety net. If you got sick or ended up in the hospital, the agency would have to step in immediately and find a safe, temporary place for the client. It sounds totally reasonable, right? In fact, it's exactly the kind of thing you'd expect to be standard.
So how did the system react to this perfectly reasonable request for a little bit of shared responsibility in a crisis? Well, the agency's response was quick and final. This is a standard contract. That was it. No discussion, no negotiation. The door was just shut.
So Victor went to the oversight body, CLBC. Their response was even more revealing. They said it was a private matter between him and the agency and that they don't interfere. The very system that's supposed to oversee these things just officially stepped aside.
When you see this all play out, it forces you to ask a really big question about what these agreements are even for.
And this is the power dynamic it creates. At the top, you have CLBC, who funds the whole system but says, we don't interfere. In the middle, you have the agency, who sets all the terms with their non-negotiable standard contract. And at the very bottom, the individual provider, totally isolated, and left to carry almost all of the risk.
So, it all comes down to this. When a government-funded system lets contracts like this exist, and the official watchdog refuses to step in, what is that contract's real purpose? Is it a tool for a supportive partnership, or has it just become a tool of pressure, designed to protect the system at the expense of the person on the front lines? That's a question really worth thinking about.